All right, another edition of Riding Home, Georgia and the Gamecocks later this week. Kirby's using stuff from 4 months ago or 3 months ago to get the fans motivated. We now know UAB and Georgia will be a night game. Ryan is navigating his way back home. Why don't you tell us everything that you heard today that mattered, Ryan, at Kirby Smart's press conference in Athens?
Yeah, I thought, my biggest takeaway from today came from Tate Ratledge. He seemed pretty locked in. Look, 99 rushing yards on Saturday,
Yeah.
28 attempts. It's not Georgia standard. And Tate Ratledge talked about that and how you could tell when they really mean it sometimes, what they're saying. And you could tell Tate Ratledge really meant that, like, they need to look, their standard is elite across the board. They want everything they do to be elite. That's what they tried to do the last couple of years. That's what they're trying to do now. And 48-7 and 45-3 are great wins, and I think there are a lot of factors going on, but not at the standard of what Georgia wants right now.
No, that's not where they need to be. But in terms of rushing the ball, that's what I'm sorry, I about called him Cade Mays. That's what Tate Ratledge said. I mean, is that Kirby wasn't saying that after the game. He was talking about how they were throwing the ball to be, using it as an extension of the run game. But listen, I think the reality is that you're going to have to run in the tackles at some point. Are they? I'm not sure. So much of this is where are we really at right now, and there's been a lot of maneuvering and change on this Georgia offense that we're probably not going to see at the end of the year. Georgia I think they became a more physical run team as the year went on this past season. Am I wrong about that, or am I just remembering it that way?
Yeah, I mean, you think about kind of the moments that went on. Missouri was a day where they ran really physically, more physically than they had to the previous, 3, 4, 5 games before that in 2022. They ran really physical against Florida. I thought they ran physical against Tennessee. So I think you're right that kind of trickled on as the year went on. And I expect the same in this season. That's an experienced offensive line group minus Ernest Green, right? And so for him, as you imagine as the season goes on, I mean, these are his first snaps out there. These first 2 games. He hasn't had real college time before this. So, and you mix in Dejan Edwards back in the loop, and you hopefully allow Kendall Milton's hamstring to get a little bit better. And, maybe Dylan Bell does become a bigger part of that piece of their offense. You would imagine that improves over the course of the season. More difficult without a physical runner like Branson Robinson. And, we're obviously seeing the effects of that immediately. But I agree with you. I think that's a valid conclusion theory, I guess.
Our friends at DoorDash have a limited time offer for you. This is not going to take very long for me to get through. Limited time, 50% off of $10 in your next $15+ order when you sign up for DoorDash student plan and enter the code DOGPOSTBTC back to college BTC. That's 50% off of your next order. That's $15 or more when you sign up for the Dash Pass student plan when you enter the code DOGPOST BTC, subject to change, terms apply. Make sure you're helping us help our friends, our sponsors, our friends at Red Zone, EcoPoly. Obviously, I'll give you a look at our chair right now. They gave me a cushion, which is, I can't easily show you right now, but make sure that you're taking advantage of everything that we are giving. There's 15% off and free shipping from our friends at EcoPoly. And Ryan and I have a little bit more spotlight of that coming up soon. When do you think that things are going to get back to normal with, Javon Bullard? Here's what Kirby had to say. Yet I've not seen Javon yet because of Sunday being off, and then today coming in. He will not practice today. I don't know, but as far as where he is, we probably won't know until Wednesday's practice whether he's going to be able to play or not. Talking about Edwards, we expect Dejan to go. He could have gone last week. That is confusing, by the way. I'm going to throw it to you in a second. But that is confusing. He said Christian Miller has a cervical strain. You're going to talk about some of these injuries a little bit later in the day. And then he says Ladd McConkey is day-to-day. I don't know when you are a 4-touchdown favorite that you got to rush to get people back necessarily. One thing that Ben Watson said over the weekend, Ryan, was that he wanted to see Georgia play a 4-quarter game. And before I throw it to you, I want to see anybody play a 4-quarter game. I think maybe Notre Dame has. Georgia, they played 4 quarters, but in that 4 quarters, it's really sort of 16 moments. So you've got the defense playing in those 4 quarters at times two, and then you've got the offense doing that. I'm not going to throw the special teams in there as well. I think special teams at Georgia, outside of a missed field goal, missed very easy field goal, has been pretty good to very good. So I don't expect them to have played a full 8 quarters so far, and I don't think they're going to play full 4 quarters on Saturday. But the defense has played pretty close to 8 quarters so far. Ryan, am I wrong?
What do you mean by they've played close to 8 quarters? Like the starting unit, or
Well,
or
I
that
mean,
they
I,
just
de-
played?
I, I,
Because
get
I
that,
don't
that.
think I agree with Ben Watson's statement there.
Are you talking about what I'm saying or what Ben said?
Kind of. Well, I
So
think you
Ben's.
kind of have to
Let me.
define. I think it needs to be defined what that means for the defense to play 4 quarters. But if it's what I think Ben Watson's
No,
talking
no, no.
about,
Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Ben said I want to see Georgia play a 4-quarter game. And then I said, essentially there are 16 quarters we've seen Georgia play. 8 by the defense, 8 by the offense, and I was not going to deal with the special teams. I think the defense has. I don't know if they've played a full game yet, but they've come a lot closer than the offense has. In terms of the criticism as what Ben had to say, I just don't. Georgia's not had to play a full game, so they've not cinched together 4 straight quarters, and I don't expect that to happen this weekend either.
I don't expect that to happen for a while.
Well, they
But
didn't have. How many times did that happen last year? TCU and what other game? Well, Oregon, TCU, probably South Carolina. So 3 of 15, 1 every 5 games, something like that. I mean, the Tennessee game was not a 4-quarter beating. The Florida game was not that way. Auburn, maybe.
so,
Vanderbilt, maybe.
so like a 4-quarter where like the throttle's on for 4 quarters, like
See, that's my point. I mean, and again, listen, Ben, I got no issue with what Ben said. I think in a theoretical world, he's right.
yeah, I don't have an issue with it either. I think I just disagree. I think if you're Georgia, you probably don't want to see that
True.
because that means you're beating people down early on, and
That's true.
that's a good thing. So,
But why does it?
in
Why
terms
does
of
Why does the standard, so to speak, if we're alleging that Georgia has a standard, which they keep saying they do, and I mean I don't
they won't
disagree.
quite tell us exactly what that is, but
They won't. You're saying?
no one really has
Articulate.
actually verbalized what the standard is or defined it. But
Well,
I
here's
think
what
the
it is.
standard. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat. I think the standard's beating the crap out of everybody.
Yeah. Well, the standard is what the Supreme Court said pornography is, which is you know it when you see it. And so we've not seen that yet from Georgia. We've seen a lot of that. And let's take the 40,000-foot view. Let's pull back some here, okay? And I've watched Notre Dame a fair amount. I've watched SC. USC can score. Newsflash. And then you got Florida State. There are some good teams out there. There are teams that Georgia can lose to. Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Notre Dame probably, maybe USC. There are teams Georgia can lose to, maybe even
You
on
gonna
their
throw Texas in there?
Well, comma and Texas. I mean, I just Texas.
Comma and Texas.
Yeah, I mean, Texas let everybody know this week that they're very serious. Whereas Florida State and Texas have had the best wins, no question. I don't know that I've really, we're totally comparing apples and grapes right now. We just don't know what certain things are like for everybody. But Florida State, they played LSU for sure. They didn't play well in that first half, man. They looked awful at times. Just did not look good. Texas, I think the week before was not ideal in some aspects. Georgia, you can say the same thing about Georgia, but it doesn't matter particularly what's happened so far for the Dogs. It's what happens moving forward. And I will say that the biggest problem in Alabama right now, they're not as disciplined as they once were, and that was one reason they lost to Texas, but it was not the exclusive reason. And what Georgia's laid the foundation of so far, if you want to call it their standard, so to speak, they just don't make a lot of mistakes. Like, the biggest they've had of the two explosive plays, the two most explosive plays this season against Georgia. One was a pick six. The other one, so there's just not been a lot of explosive plays against Georgia, and then that's for Tennessee Martin it was a 26-yard run. For Ball State it was a 49-yard interception return where Carson Beck thought it was an offsides. Am I wrong? Am I getting that wrong?
No, yeah, and it was a 50-50 ball as well that just point blank Dylan Bell lost it. He lost that battle, and I think it's not as easy to tell so far through 2 games this year. To me, the rankings of these college football teams, I don't know that Georgia's done anything that just screams we're the top team in the country. I don't know that Michigan. I don't think that any team has really screamed that quite yet. And Georgia screamed that in the first 5 minutes against Oregon. So it's a little bit different of a ball game there. But I also don't know that you've seen, I guess, outside of the, but to your point, Florida State didn't look phenomenal in the first half of LSU. No. Texas didn't just, handle Alabama for 4 quarters. I think that they played really hard for 4 quarters. So there hasn't been a single team that has dealt with that for 4 quarters and just looked through and through. Hey, no one's beating us.
I'll tell you this. One more thing about explosive plays, which is Georgia is 27-7 on those. Okay, so 27 total explosive plays, 15 against UT Martin, and then 12 against Ball State to 7 total. I don't know when those 7 came against UT Martin and Ball State, but if Georgia puts together a performance that is not dissimilar to what they've been putting up, and you've got 12 quarters of something like 40-something to 10, that's all. I mean, you can say, oh, South Carolina's not good, and Ball State's not good, and UT Martin's not good. Yeah, and Georgia's treating them like that. And they're putting them down. We're going to see with Florida State if they can continue. I am impressed when teams don't play big. It doesn't matter to me who you're necessarily playing. Perhaps that accentuates things, but with Florida State, Florida State goes to Boston College this week, and we're going to see if that, if that's problematic for them. I doubt it, but how will they look? You know what I mean? What will that game look like for them? They're playing back-to-back noon games with Boston College, and then they play at Clemson. They're going to play the Taters at 12. So, I want to see how many quarters you put it together, because when you're explosive, you're explosive. USC is going to score, period.
Dude, USC, 49 points in one. I know it's Sanford, but I
don't care.
That's legit. And if Georgia ends up having to play a team that does that, they're going to have to be able to keep, they'll have to get stops, but they'll have to be able to keep up as well.
Yep.
And Georgia hasn't, 31 of the 31-point explosion in the second quarter. That was not just a 31-point offensive explosion. Right. That was a team explosion.
Right.
It was defense, special teams, and offense.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what you get with Georgia. Can they do that for 4 quarters? If they can do that for 4 quarters, they're not losing a game, because they're that talented across the board.
You said they're not losing a game.
If they're hitting on all 3 units, they're not losing a single game.
I don't know. I do not think they will, as it stands through however many quarters we've seen so far, I do not think that Georgia will be losing a game in this regular season. Now, let's just go backwards here on the Ben Watson statement. There's not a lot of, the stench comes, Ben Watson. There are some really smart and intellectual guys that have come through Georgia. Ben is definitely one of them. Georgia has scored in 6 of the 8 quarters they've played football in. They've allowed points only in 2 quarters, both of which were the fourth quarter, Ryan. They've gone 7, 10, 14, and 17, first, second, third, and fourth quarter against Tennessee Martin. And then they went 0, 31, 14, 0 against Ball State. So it's not as lopsided as it seems. I think the way I looked at 31 was a lot. for Georgia. But they really did score, pretty consistently against Tennessee Martin. I think to some degree, the first drive is what's bothering people at this point. They didn't get points against Ball State. You get 3 points there. I don't know, but are they the best team in the country? To me, they still are. I'm not sure if I've seen anybody better than Georgia. I think I've seen people certainly in their universe. I mean, Florida State is going to be hard to deal with. I would take Georgia, but Florida State is going to be hard to deal with. Alabama would still be difficult to deal with. Texas, USC. It's all spread out. There are players at Florida State, LSU, Alabama. USC certainly offensively has a lot of players. But if Georgia does to South Carolina, what I think they will, and Kirby's already geeking people up about what a Carolina player said about Georgia.
Yeah, I
ahead.
don't think we've seen what Georgia is yet, and I think it's going to be a lot closer to that this coming weekend. They take these games seriously. Kirby talked about that today, especially when you're at schools that are in such close geographic proximity. He talks about a lot of Georgia guys go over there. A lot of South Carolina kids have come over and played in Athens. So
way more Georgia kids go to Carolina, though.
Say what?
There's far more, players go to South Carolina than come from South Carolina and play at Georgia. There's a lot more that go over there. I can think of one guy from South Carolina right now on Georgia's roster. Well, there's two. One from the upstate.
Top of my head.
One from the upstate and one from Charleston. There's probably, 12 to 15 players from Georgia on South Carolina. That's why it's a big, big game for them. And it's really their second biggest game of the year. I had someone, watching on YouTube, Ryan, get into this discussion about how South Carolina's a rivalry for Georgia.
It is. It's not one of those three. Look, all of these teams that they're playing every year are a rival to an extent, and especially when you share a border. Is it one of Georgia's traditional rivals like Florida, Auburn? No, but it's a game that matters. It's a game. Look, Will Muschamp was the head coach there recently. There's a lot of ties there. Shane Beamer has ties. Used to be on the Georgia staff. This game matters, and no, it's not a traditional rival, but it's a rivalry for sure.
No, it's not. But that's another discussion, another distinction from their time. If Georgia South Carolina is a rivalry, then that means we're still trying to make Georgia and Clemson rivals, Georgia South Carolina rivals, Georgia and Kentucky at that point are rivals because they play every year and they played forever. Georgia and Ole Miss, Georgia and Vanderbilt. When does this end? Georgia and Missouri are not rivals. The closest thing to Georgia's big three rivals, their only rivals, is Tennessee. That's it. And that, I don't think that game, Georgia and Alabama, they're not rivals. They're not. They border each other. They play each other. But we can't,
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not.
I know you don't know. I'm letting you know.
I do. I think that there are different types of rivalries, and
yeah, there are actual.
Not the way that you're defining rivalry right now, but Georgia does have a rivalry with Alabama in this college football world right now, the way things are. And
listen, man, look, every game is not a rivalry. Georgia and LSU, Georgia and Alabama. Georgia and LSU have never played for the national championship, but they play for the SEC a bunch. Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. Are they rivals? I don't see how Florida can't be rivals with everybody. Same thing with Alabama. They're just big games. There's a difference there between playing really meaningful, huge games, Georgia, Ohio State, or you can't. This is probably a discussion for another time, but it can't be that every game you play is a rivalry. There are big games. South Carolina is a big game. Tennessee is a big game. Kentucky is not always a big game, but and then there's Georgia, Florida, Georgia, Auburn, and Georgia Tech. And for the Gators, it's Georgia, Florida State, and Tennessee. And for them, to some degree, LSU. So it can't be that just because you play someone every year, Georgia, Kentucky, Georgia, Vanderbilt, if the SEC felt so strongly about preserving a rivalry with Georgia, South Carolina, they would have not, they would have played them in 2024, whatever the year is. So every game can't be a rivalry. That's all. I mean, Georgia, you can't say Georgia has 5 rivals. I mean, it's just not. I mean, then every game is a rivalry, and it's not. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that they look at it that way, though. I think that they
Yeah, I
look
know they
at it
do, but they're wrong.
as
I mean,
whatever, whatever.
the players will use any excuse. We know that. The players will say anything, but Kirby knows it's not a rivalry. I mean, it's a big game. That's all.
Well, either way, it's yeah. Okay, fine. It's a big game, and they view it that way. This is one that every single game is circled on the calendar, man. That's what Again, something that Ratledge was talking about. I don't remember the exact quote, but they look at every game the same. They prepare the same way.
Right.
Obviously, there are different wrinkles for each week because that's how it goes. But they look at every game like that's what it was. Every game is a big game. That was the quote.
Every game's what now?
Every game is a big game.
Well,
and in college football, that's true.
Well, I get that. I understand what the players are saying. I'm just saying over here in reality on Earth, remember what Nolan was talking about last year with the 7-5 stupidity? I mean, it's just like, someone has to be the arbiter of what is based in reality. And God bless Kirby, but he's not always the person that, we can rely on to, he's got a team to motivate. He's got guys that are saying, he's pulling stuff from 3 months ago, Ryan, about what the kid from South Carolina said about Georgia not being a hard place to play. I mean, is it? I mean,
yeah,
you've been to Tennessee. You've been to Auburn. I've been to Death Valley many times. LSU's very hard to play at. I've been to Alabama. Is Sanford better than those 4?
Is Stanford
Sometimes.
better than Auburn? Yeah, at times.
At times.
But at times, those places are better. Sanford has become one of the hardest places to play. It not the hardest. It might never be the most difficult, but it's up there. And they've shown that, just in recent years, the environments that have been created. 2019 Notre Dame, that environment, remember all those false starts? Arkansas 21. So those environments can be created by Georgia fans. It is a tough place to play. I imagine it'll be a tough place to play this week.
Tennessee last year. I mean, Tennessee last year was
that was up there, man. You could,
people now
with a couple of those games as far as which the best environment was, but Tennessee was up there too.
Notre Dame in 19 was different than LSU in 13. Was different than Arkansas in 21 and Tennessee in 22. But they are all good examples of what that place can be like when, everybody's frothed up and ready to go. Speaking of rivals earlier, I wonder if we will ever see Sanford at a fever pitch for Georgia Tech again. I don't know. Yeah, you're shaking your head no, but I am old enough to remember where that game was really, really a full-blown panic. The Gators never come to Athens. That may or may not happen in the future, but long-term it probably won't. And then, when Auburn is in Athens, lately Georgia's dominated that game. But it's not always been like that. And, that has been a really so we've seen where, LSU, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Arkansas, the games that sort of jump out, those are not really, traditional rivalry games, obviously, but the crowd showed up there. South Carolina is going to have a hard time functioning on Saturday night because I know how this crowd is, man. Ryan, they were ready to throw red meat in game 1 at the Tennessee Martin game. Now that they have a legitimate foe coming in there, and Kirby's pulling stuff out of the blue to motivate the fans. I mean, the fans will buy it. They will be there. They will be ready to party, and they will use any excuse to jump down South Carolina's back. And that Carolina's offensive line is as jumpy as it is probably not a great thing for them either.
Yeah, well, the town will be more filled up, right?
Oh, yeah.
More people will come for this game than they did for the previous 2.
It's a big social game.
Yeah, exactly. There will be more students that come from South Carolina. It'll be a better atmosphere, and it'll probably start Thursday, Friday versus starting on Saturday for the Ball State game. Last week around here, it was dead for a game week.
Yeah,
as dead as I've seen a game week in a while,
Yeah.
and I just expect as we trickle on the next couple of days, that's going to change. Just that the close proximity, and it is a big game with South Carolina,
No
and
question.
it. I imagine that Saturday will be a very good environment. It'll be a very good college football environment.
It would be even bigger if Carolina were undefeated, but it's just what it is. And Georgia, I don't think this is going to be super close. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.